Hey everyone. So this is another disturbing revelation and a perfect example of why you never want government to be involved in anything that has to do with economics. Now this particular article that I'm going to be referencing has to do with that Trans Mountain pipeline. You know, the one that was going to be built originally by a private corporation, a private business that was willing to pony up their own money, their own funds, and their own resources to get it done. And at a much, much lower price than what's on offer now, since the federal Liberals bought that pipeline for $4.5 billion and have now turned that project into a typical government-run boondoggle, which is now going to cost a whole lot more. And those costs will be forced and imposed on you, whether you like it or not. Headline out of CBC News, Politics, cost of Trans Mountain expansion soars to $12.6 billion. Figures include $1.1 billion already spent on construction by previous owner of the project, Kinder Morgan. This being reported by Vasi Capellos and John Paul Tasker, February 7th, 2020. Trans Mountain CEO Ian Anderson announced Friday that the cost of building the pipeline expansion has soared from an initial estimate of $7.4 billion to $12.6 billion. In a conference call with reporters, Anderson said increased material and labor costs are to blame for the cost overruns, along with years-long legal troubles and renewed Indigenous consultation efforts that also added to the final total. Despite the sizable increase from the initial 2017 cost estimate, Anderson said the project will be profitable because much of its capacity has already been sold to major oil producers like Suncor and Cenovus on 20-year contracts. He said the project will generate $1.5 billion a year in cash flow when it's fully operational. While the project is owned by the federal government, Anderson said he's run the company as if it were a private entity and the cost overruns would be incurred by any proponent building the expansion. Yeah, the government's going to run a business the way that a private sector business would, right? This guy has some really serious misconceptions in terms of what government is and what it does. And even if they can make the argument that it can still be profitable, well, I'm sure it would have been a whole lot more profitable if big government did get their grubby hands on it. Anderson said recent legal victories at the Supreme Court of Canada and the Federal Court of Appeal have given the project greater legal certainty. I believe there's a path, and that path is getting clearer each day, he said. I'm confident the project itself remains very, very strongly economically viable. Technically speaking, right? There isn't anyone who could picture the journey we've been on to get this project started and what it will take to get it constructed. That $12.6 billion construction cost figure includes $1.1 billion already spent on the construction by the previous owner of the project, Kinder Morgan, before Ottawa bought the project amid legal uncertainty. The construction cost is in addition. Let me repeat that for you, folks. The construction cost is in addition to the more than $4 billion the federal government spent to purchase the existing pipeline and the expansion plan. And another $600 million Ottawa set aside for contingencies, called a reserve fund for cost impacts. Those sums bring the total cost of taxpayers' investment in Trans Mountain to more than $16 billion. The August 2018 Federal Court of Appeal ruling that quashed Cabinet's approval of the project was source of cost overruns. As a result of that ruling, the government had to make a number of accommodations to Indigenous communities along the route and meet additional environmental standards. Changes that added roughly $3 billion to the construction price tag. The project that we're all working on building today is not the project we originally envisioned and introduced in 2012, Anderson said. Anderson said the project has more support from Indigenous communities than it did when it was first proposed. 58 Indigenous communities along the project's route have signed impact benefit agreements with the Crown Corporation that cover financial incentives, job training, bursaries, pensions for Indigenous elders, and funds for community infrastructure upgrades. These agreements will cost the proponents about $500 million. Well, even with all of that extra cost and expenditure, that $500 million, that $500 million is basically a drop in the bucket compared to this almost $16 billion that this project is now going to cost. Once again, folks, never, ever, ever let government anywhere near the business sector or have any control over the economy. How many examples do you need before you come to realize that? Well, a lot of you people that will be watching my videos, you probably already understand that. A lot of your other fellow Canadians don't. You might want to point this stuff out to them, because I don't want to just be here to educate and inform you, especially if you're already up to speed and kind of on board with the kind of things I talk about. It's really important that you share videos such as this one with other people so they get to learn this information as well. That's how we spread knowledge, folks. I'm all for you consuming my content, but you also should be willing to share it as well. It doesn't cost you anything except a few seconds of your time. Anyways, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below. I just had to cover this. I mean, just think about the cost overrun, all as a direct result of the federal government, the Trudeau Liberals, intervening into a private corporation or a business to develop an infrastructure project. The market is very, very efficient and well adept at reducing costs and expenditures for projects such as this. That is what the market is for. The minute you take it out of the hands of market participants and put it in the hands of big government, especially the Trudeau Liberals, well, this is the direct result and consequence of doing so. And it's you and I that's going to pay the added costs, both directly and indirectly. Make no mistake about it. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.